At 3:15 in the morning, while a coordinated wave of cyber attacks was quietly testing the defenses of a regional banking network. I took off my headset and walked away. Not because I was overwhelmed, not because I didn't understand what was happening on my screens, and definitely not because I couldn't stop it. I walked away because, just a few hours earlier, they told me exactly what I was worth: $4,500. My name is Kayla Scott. I'm 45 years old, and until 3 months ago, I spent most of my nights sitting in a dimly lit operations center in Denver, Colorado, working for a cybersecurity firm called Northbridge Systems, while the city slept. I monitored live network traffic, traced suspicious activity, and stopped breaches before they could become headlines. It wasn't glamorous work. Nobody applauded when nothing went wrong. But when something did, that's when my phone lit up. That's when I became the difference between a normal morning and financial chaos for thousands of people. For nearly 2 decades, I was that difference. I didn't quit in a dramatic outburst. No shouting, no slammed doors, no speech about loyalty or respect. I left the way you leave something that's been quietly wearing you down for years, slowly, carefully, with a strange sense of relief you didn't expect. But to understand why, I stood up in the middle of an active attack and walked out. You have to go back to a Thursday morning meeting, a meeting that was supposed to reward loyalty, a meeting that did something else entirely. That's where this story really begins. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, but only if you believe you deserve to be treated fairly at work. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what's the temperature there right now? This is a fictional story. Some details are enhanced with AI to make it more vivid, but the feelings behind it are completely real. Now, grab a warm drink, get comfortable, and let's begin. Thursday morning started like any other quiet, routine, forgettable. The kind of day where nothing feels like it's about to change your life. I logged off from my shift just after sunrise, poured myself a second cup of coffee, and sat down to check the internal calendar before heading to bed. That's when I saw it. All hands meeting, mandatory. Those meetings were never about good news, no matter how they dressed them up. In cybersecurity, when leadership gathers everyone at once, it usually means one thing: something's broken, or they're afraid it will be. I stayed up longer than I should have. Joining the call from my home office, cameras flickered on one by one, faces from different time zones, different departments, all wearing the same polite curiosity. Then came Melissa Grant, our director of operations, with that practiced smile I'd seen 100 times before. "We're investing in our people," she said. "We want to recognize our most critical contributors and ensure long-term stability for the company." I almost muted my mic so she wouldn't hear me laugh. Critical contributors. That phrase always sounded impressive until you realized it rarely meant what it should. For 19 years, I'd been the one handling the worst incidents: holiday breaches, overnight attacks, the kind of problems no one else wanted to deal with. If critical meant anything, it should have meant people like me, Melissa continued, explaining the new retention bonus program. Select employees would receive financial incentives to stay for the next 12 months. The details, she said, would be shared privately. Privately. That was the first real signal, because when companies don't want people comparing numbers, it's usually because the numbers don't add up. Jason Miller got his call first. He was the team lead for the day shift, early 30s. Confident, always relaxed in a way that made the job look easier than it actually was. The kind of person management loved: visible, approachable, always saying the right things in meetings. About 10 minutes after he dropped off the call, a message popped up in our team chat. "Wow, didn't expect that. Feeling appreciated today." A few seconds later, he sent me a private message. It was a screenshot. $32,000. Cash bonus, not stock. Not some complicated vesting schedule. Real money, tied to a simple agreement to stay for 12 months. "Told you," he added. "They know who matters around here." I stared at the number longer than I'd like to admit. Not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed something I had been trying not to see for years. This wasn't about contribution. It was about perception. Jason was visible during the day. He talked to leadership, joined strategy calls, gave updates that made everything sound under control. Meanwhile, I worked in the background, catching problems before they ever reached those meetings. No one applauds the crisis that never happens. My call came 20 minutes later. Melissa appeared on screen again. Same polished smile, same rehearsed tone. "Kayla, first of all, thank you. You've been such a stabilizing force on the night shift for so many years." I nodded. "That's what you do in these moments. You let them say the nice part first. We're offering you a retention bonus as well," she continued, pausing just long enough to build anticipation. "We're really excited about this." Another pause. $4,500. For a second, I thought I misheard her. My brain actually waited for her to correct it, like maybe she'd dropped a zero or read the wrong number. She didn't. $4,500, she repeated, still smiling, as if this was something worth celebrating. And just like that, everything became perfectly clear. If you believe Melissa Grant was right to reward someone who contributed less while overlooking the person who carried the hardest responsibilities night after night, go ahead and comment agree. But if you feel that kind of decision is unfair, if you think loyalty and real impact should matter more, then write "I oppose" in the comments. Sometimes, the smallest reactions reveal what we truly stand for. And I'm curious to know where you stand. When the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just sat there in the dim blue glow of my monitors. The number still echoing in my head, like it meant something more than it actually did. $4,500. It wasn't even the amount itself that bothered me. It was what it represented. A quiet, calculated statement about where I stood in a system I had carried for nearly 2 decades. Melissa had added one more line before hanging up. "This reflects budget considerations, not your performance." I'd heard versions of that sentence my entire career. It always sounded reasonable on the surface, almost comforting. But the longer you sat with it, the less sense it made. If it wasn't about performance, then what exactly was it about? I already knew the answer. I opened the spreadsheet I kept for my personal finances. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, tuition, numbers that actually mattered. My daughter was starting her second year in college that fall. Pre-med, working harder than I ever had at her age. Her tuition alone was more than 3 times the bonus I'd just been offered. I typed in $4,500. Then, without really thinking, I typed $32,000 on the line below it, side by side. The difference didn't feel abstract anymore. It felt deliberate. A week earlier, Jason had missed a critical alert during a handoff. Nothing catastrophic. But it could have been. I was the one who caught it, traced the anomaly, and neutralized the threat before it escalated. Melissa had sent out a team-wide email afterward, thanking everyone for maintaining high standards. Everyone. That's how it worked. Credit was shared when things went well, but accountability was quietly assigned when things didn't. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the silence settle. This wasn't about one bonus. It wasn't even about Jason. It was about a pattern I had been excusing for years, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself it would even out eventually, telling myself that if I just kept doing the work, someone would notice. They had noticed. And this was the result. Monday night started quietly, the way most dangerous nights do. By 11:40 p.m., the first alerts came in, small at first routine probes, low-level scans hitting one of our financial clients' external systems, the kind of activity you don't panic over, but you don't ignore either. I logged in, pulled up the traffic logs, and started tracing the source. Eastern Europe. Not unusual, but the pattern. That was different. Too clean. Too coordinated. Within minutes. The alerts began stacking faster than I could clear them. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. I adjusted the filters, isolating the entry points. 3 vectors, all testing different layers of the client's infrastructure. Whoever was behind this knew exactly where to look and how to stay just under the threshold long enough to avoid immediate escalation. My phone buzzed. "Jason!" "Hey, Kayla!" seeing some weird activity on the dashboard. You on this? I glanced at the message, then back at the screens lighting up in front of me. He could see the alerts, but he didn't understand what they meant yet. He was looking at symptoms. I was looking at intent. Yeah, I typed back. I'm on it. In another window, the retention agreement Melissa had sent earlier that day was still open. 12-month commitment, repayment clause if I left early, confidentiality terms, and a line that stood out more now than it had before. At-will employment remains in effect. They wanted commitment from me, without offering any in return. The attack escalated again. New traffic patterns, more aggressive probing, still controlled. Still quiet, but moving closer to something that could turn very real. Very fast. I leaned forward, elbows on the desk, watching it unfold. I had seen this before. Holiday weekends, overnight shifts, moments when the people who made decisions weren't around to deal with consequences. Moments when everything depended on whoever was still there. And tonight, that person was me. By 1:10 a.m., the situation had shifted from concerning to critical. The attackers weren't just testing anymore. They were adapting. I watched as one of the entry points suddenly went quiet, only for traffic to reappear somewhere deeper in the system. That wasn't luck. That was someone mapping our defenses in real time, learning how we responded, then adjusting faster than most teams could keep up. My phone rang. Unknown number. International code. I didn't answer. People think hackers announce themselves, that they taunt or brag. The good ones don't. They move silently, efficiently, and disappear before anyone fully understands what happened. The call wasn't a mistake. It was noise, a distraction. But it told me something important. They knew someone was watching. They knew someone capable was on the other end. At 1:45 a.m., I had a choice to make. I could follow protocol, escalate to Melissa, wake up the incident response team, spend the next few hours explaining details to people who hadn't touched the system in months, or I could handle it myself. I'd done it before, dozens of times, maybe more. Quiet fixes that never made it into reports. Problems solved before anyone important even noticed they existed. That's what they valued me for. That's what they paid me $4,500 to keep doing. My screen filled with new alerts. The attackers had shifted again, this time targeting internal administrative access. If they broke through there, it wouldn't just be one client at risk. It would be everything. My phone buzzed with another message from Jason. This is getting serious. Should we loop Melissa in? I stared at the words longer than I needed to. Should we loop Melissa in? The same Melissa who had smiled through a number that told me exactly how little my role actually mattered. Your call, I typed back. You're the team lead. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, came back again, finally. His reply came through. I think you should handle it. You know this better than anyone. There it was. The truth no one ever said out loud. At 2:40 a.m., Melissa finally picked up. Her voice was thick with sleep, the kind of irritation people don't bother hiding when they think they shouldn't have been called in the first place. Kayla! Is this urgent? I looked at the screen in front of me. The breach attempt had moved deeper. Touching systems it should never have reached. One more successful push. And they wouldn't just be testing anymore, they'd be inside. Yes, I said calmly. A pause. How urgent? I leaned back slightly, eyes still tracking the live data streams. Access attempts were increasing in frequency, probing for weak points. They were getting closer. They're moving toward internal administrative controls. I said, if they gain elevated access, they'll have visibility across every client environment. Silence, not the kind where someone is thinking through a solution, the kind where they're realizing they don't have one. What do you need me to do? She asked finally. I let that question sit for a moment. For years, I had answered it without hesitation, walked people through steps they should have known, fixed problems they didn't understand, carried the responsibility without ever asking whether it was actually mine to carry. Nothing, I said. Just wanted you to be aware of the situation. Another pause. Shorter this time. Can you stop it? I could. I had stopped worse with less time and fewer resources. That was the part no one questioned. The part everyone depended on. Probably, I replied. Then do whatever you have to do. Kayla, just fix it. There it was again. Not a request, not a discussion, an expectation. Fix it. I glanced at the other window still open on my screen, the retention agreement. 12 months of commitment. The same workload, the same nights. The same invisible pressure. For $4,500. Melissa repeated it. More firmly this time, just fix it. At 3:15 a.m., I reached up, removed my headset, and set it down on the desk. I took my badge off slowly, feeling the weight of it in my hand for a second longer than necessary. Then I stood up. No announcement, no message, no explanation. I walked out of the room, leaving the screens glowing behind me, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. If you would have made the same choice as I did walking away, instead of fixing everything for people who didn't value you, then right, I support you, so I know I wasn't wrong. If you would have chosen differently, just write no. And if you're still thinking it through, trying to decide what you would do in that moment, right time. Sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that finally show us what we're worth. The strange thing about walking away in the middle of a cyber attack is that the attack doesn't stop just because you're gone. The people on the other side don't suddenly lose interest. They don't pause out of respect. They keep moving, keep probing, keep pushing forward only now. The systems they're testing are defended by people who don't fully understand how those systems actually work. I found out later how the rest of that night unfolded. What should have taken 30 minutes took over 3 hours. 3 hours of exposed systems, 3 hours of escalating alerts, 3 hours of confusion, miscommunication, and delayed decisions by the time they finally contained it. The damage wasn't just technical, it was operational, reputational, the kind of damage that doesn't show up immediately but lingers in client reports, in follow-up meetings, in questions that don't have easy answers. By sunrise, internal channels were already filling up, missed alerts, delayed responses, escalations from clients who had started noticing unusual activity. By noon, my phone started buzzing. First Slack messages, then texts, then missed calls from Melissa. No voicemails, just repeated attempts, one after another. When people are confident, they leave clear messages. When they're not, they just keep dialing. I checked my email once. That was enough. Tickets had piled up overnight, stacked like something no one knew how to sort through anymore. One of our European clients had already escalated to their executive team. Another was referencing penalty clauses in their contract. Buried in the inbox was a calendar invite. Emergency coverage discussion. No context, no acknowledgement, no apology, just expectation. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment, letting it all settle in. This wasn't a one-night failure. It was a system finally exposed, and for the first time in a long time, it wasn't mine to fix. By Wednesday afternoon, things had shifted. The messages stopped sounding urgent and started sounding uncertain. Paul Henderson, our VP of Operations, called me directly. In 19 years. I had spoken to him exactly twice, and both times something was already on fire. Kayla, he said, skipping any kind of introduction. We're seeing cascading issues from Monday night. Melissa mentioned you have the most context on our systems. Context, not ownership, not responsibility, just context. I do, I replied. A brief pause. Can you join a call with the team, help us stabilize things? I glanced at the retention agreement still sitting unopened in my inbox. 12 months of commitment. Same workload, same expectations, same invisible pressure for $4,500. I can, I said slowly, but I won't. Silence. Not confusion, not surprise. Just silence long enough to confirm that he understood exactly why. Why not, he asked, though it sounded more like a formality than a real question. Because that's what the retention bonus was for, I said. You already decided who was worth keeping. His tone shifted slightly. controlled but sharper now. "This isn't the time for that conversation. It's exactly the time," I replied. "You wanted to retain me for $4,500. This is what that decision looks like." Another pause. "Shorter this time. We'll revisit this tomorrow," he said, then ended the call. But they didn't revisit anything. By Thursday morning, the internal status dashboard had moved from green to yellow to orange. Someone made the mistake of adding a note about internal resource constraints. Clients noticed. They always do. By Friday, Jason called me. Not a message, not a quick ping. A real call. "Kayla," he said, voice tighter than I'd ever heard it. "Look, I know things are complicated, but we really need your help. I'm in over my head with some of this." I let a second pass before answering. "You got the bonus." "Jason," I said quietly, "this is what it's for." He didn't respond right away, and that silence said everything by the following Monday. The system status turned red, not because everything had collapsed, but because people were finally paying attention. Red forces conversations. It brings executives into rooms they usually avoid. It turns quiet problems into visible ones. And once something becomes visible, it's only a matter of time before people start asking the right questions. Those questions didn't come all at once. They came slowly. Who approved the retention bonuses? What criteria were used? Why was night shift performance consistently undervalued? How could one person walking away expose such a critical gap? No one had clean answers. Melissa stopped appearing in meetings first. No announcement, no explanation, just gone. Her name quietly removed from directories like she had never been there. In companies like Northbridge, people don't disappear unless someone higher up decides they should. Jason lasted longer. He tried to step up, took more calls, spoke more in meetings, but visibility has a way of revealing things you can't hide behind anymore. When the questions got technical, when the details mattered, his confidence didn't carry him the way it used to. He wasn't incapable. He just wasn't who they thought he was. 3 weeks after I walked away, I accepted a new role. Day shift, better pay, a team that actually understood the work. They didn't ask me to prove my value. I didn't have to. I sent in my resignation the same way I left that night. Quiet, clean, final. Because in the end, nothing I did brought that system down. They did that themselves. All I did was stop holding it together. There's a moment in life when you realize that working harder won't make people value you more, and that staying silent only teaches them to keep overlooking you. I realized that my value isn't measured by how much pressure I can exert, but by my willingness to leave when something no longer respects me. We all deserve to be seen, to be treated fairly, and to build a life where our effort actually means something. If this story resonated with you, then you're someone who understands value not just in work, but in people. Be part of this community by sharing your thoughts in the comments, supporting with a like, and subscribing so we can keep telling stories that remind us who we really are.